Welcome to another installment of Intelligence, bringing you knowledge with the power to change. I'm your host, Brennan Dunn. We've got a full show today, and when I say full, I mean we got full of guests and full of talk. We're going to be discussing colorism, the many changing faces of colorism, as well as cultural appropriation. We've got some current events that we're going to shoot out at you, but most of the show will be about black people and intra-racial tension. Joining us today, we've got a special guest, Juanita Jackson. She is a Houston area criminal defense attorney. How are you, Juanita?
Hey, Brennan.
I am so happy to have you on the show.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Next up, we have my main man, the tech guru, Charles Sherrod Jr. Charles, what's up, man?
What's up, man?
Can't call it?
Yeah.
You ready?
Always.
All right, now. Next, we have the beautiful young lady, Dantrice McNeil. She is a Houston area local singer and photographer. How are you, Dantrice?
I'm great.
All right, now, you ready?
Yep.
All right. And I'm going to pull a ride and be like, who are you again? Who are you? This is David.
Dantrice.
You're Dantrice?
I'm Dantrice.
Oh, I like the other version of Dantrice.
Oh, okay. Well, I am your Dantrice.
Pause. This is Damon Parrish II. Coming in here as one of our spokesman for the legal community, criminal defense attorney extraordinaire. Next up on the list, we have Danny Tillman. She is also a Houston-based photographer. Danny, you ready today?
I was born ready.
Ooh, caliente. And now we got the Shadow Prince himself, Quentin Broadwater, our regent for all things mechanical and all things engineering. How are you, man?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good.
All right, you ready?
Even in the shade.
Even in the shade. Well, you stay in the shade, though. But it's all good. All right.
See what this show gonna be today.
So let's start off with something interesting that just happened in the news. So in case you don't recall, Jordan Edwards, he was a young man that was shot and killed along the long list of other young black men that have been shot and killed within recent history by police officers. Former officer Roy Oliver historically was just convicted by a jury of his peers and sentenced to 15 years in prison. This is interesting. This is only like the second or third time in recent history that a police officer has actually been found guilty of murder of an unarmed black person. If we recall, he tried to lie about it at first and say, hey, the vehicle that Jordan Edwards was in was coming at us. I feared for myself and my partner's life. I shot at the car, killed him. Officer Oliver was called to the scene of a party which was suspected to have underage drinking, which subsequently led to the death of this young man who was slated to go, I think he wanted to go to Alabama for football. I mean, he had a bright future ahead of him. Ladies and gentlemen, how happy should we be about this? I mean, it's almost like you've given us the inch. Should we be asking for the mile? Charles, what do you think?
I don't know if happy is the right phrase or term I would use. I would think that in cases like this, what you're looking for is, at the best case scenario, people looking at the facts and giving some sort of justice, some sort of peace to the family. At least they know the person responsible for their child's death, for their brother, for that person's death. It has to take responsibility under the law. I just think the climate should be such that with, some of the protests, the things that are happening now, the climate should be such that people have to think if they do something wrong, they're going to have to face those consequences. I think in the past, police officers those police officers that didn't act with their training and did stuff like that, they didn't think they were going to have to be held accountable. So I don't know if I'm happy. I would say I'm probably relieved for the family, and I look at it as, it's still a tragedy, but maybe some good can come out. Maybe people will start looking at what they're doing.
Now, Juanita, you coming from the criminal defense side, is this something, we often say that the more convictions we get, the less likely it is that police officers will continue the behavior that they've been doing. Do you think this is enough to give a wake-up call, or is this an accident in the grand scheme of things?
This was not enough. I'm on one hand, yes, we're all happy there was finally a rare conviction, but I felt like the 15 years was a slap in the face of our people. I think that this young man who was, in the articles that I've read, he was stellar. You know, I think he had like a 3.5 GPA. They said he really was the real deal. Like, he was a scholar, he was an athlete, he was everything that you would want in a child. And I think, as a mother of a black son, that I will sit there and tell you that if that was my son, I would still be angry. That you sitting there, this jury, which was a majority white, and I get that we finally got a conviction, but you went back there and thought, okay, well, we'll just give him a year for every year of this little boy's life. Really? That's all it's worth?
Well, I think his wife was asking for 5 years as the minimum, saying that, you know, they have a autistic daughter at home.
Should have thought, like we get all the time when we are arguing for our clients, the DA say, should have thought about that before you did it. You know, it's the same thing. I think I'd be upset. I think the appropriate sentence would have been double, with 30 years. You know, or actually even more in my mind, but I understand that at least we got a murder conviction. We didn't get a manslaughter. We didn't get a aggravated assault.
Right.
We didn't get so many other things. So I don't want to seem like I'm not appreciative that we're taking a tiny step. But I needed a leap.
You know, Brennan, the only thing I wanted to address what you said was, do I think it'll be a deterrent? I think punishments have shown that people don't consider the punishment when they commit a crime. If prison itself was a deterrent to crime, we wouldn't have clients. So I don't think this will be a deterrent, not because I think cops are all evil. I just think people just don't consider what my actions might lead to tomorrow when I do them today. So I don't think that it's going to be a deterrent. I am glad that it's a message that was sent, though, that, hey, you know, we're looking at you, and more importantly, the public is looking at you, and the public will judge you differently than way before, right? The blue wall is crumbling. But I don't think it'll be a deterrent in the sense that we think. Like, cops will say this and say, oh, now I can't do this anymore because I might go to prison. Now they'll say, if I do it, let me be smarter about it, or let me do it differently, let me plant a gun. Let's figure another way around this.
Well, what do you think was the real difference maker in this one? I mean, I don't know if he really did anything differently than every other cop has done when they've gone in and been overzealous in their actions.
So I think this one, you have a child. And anytime you have a child as a victim is almost akin to, like, in some sense, a woman. The public wants to protect children. They want to protect women. So when you have a child as a victim, they're going to be judged differently. Now, had this young man been an actual young man, a 19, 20-year-old, I don't think the verdict would have been the same.
And Damon, let me interrupt you here. They couldn't vilify him.
Right, because he's only
That
15.
was the problem. Every single time when we have seen this over and over again, they turn the tables. You know, from somebody just selling cigarettes to even Philando Castile, who was a good guy, but he shouldn't have getting ready to pull. He had a gun in the car. You know, so there was nothing that they could do to vilify this 15-year-old because he was stellar. That was the only thing that made this difference.
Danny, do you see this as a you know, we're talking from the we're all practitioners in the law field. Do you see this as a win, or do you see this as a wash?
I can see it as both, to be honest. When I heard the verdict, I was like, yes, but then I was like, okay, in the news, there'll be somebody else. Next week, there'll be somebody different. And had his partner not said anything, and had his partner not got up there and told the truth, it could have been just like every other case that we've seen in the past. So you got to look at stuff like that as well. Like you said, I'm appreciative and I'm elated, but then again, it's like only 15 years.
Yeah.
1 year for every year he was alive. Like, why we couldn't get double that? Why couldn't he get life? Like, he killed that boy. That was, somebody's son or somebody's baby.
You know, you bring up a good point about his partner. So often we see that we vilify the actual shooter, forgetting the rest of the compatriots who were right there standing in arms with them. You know, we don't speak. This is an in-house matter. We keep our stuff to ourselves. They are just as complicit a lot of times in these murders as the actual shooter, but they don't get any of the glory of the downfall. And I think that you brought up a good point with that. We're going to move into the next part of this. It's still keeping with this criminal justice, actually. California has just done away with the cash bail system. Governor Jerry Brown signed into law last week a law getting rid of the cash bail bond system. In case you don't know what that means, essentially when you are arrested, a bond has to be set for you by a magistrate or a judge who says in order for you to get out on your own, you have to pay a certain amount of money. Sometimes you get off on what's called a PR bond or personal recognizance bond that says you don't have to pay anything to get out, but based on your character, we're going to let you out for free. Essentially, bond is supposed to be something that is supposed to secure your presence in court, or it's supposed to or in lieu of that, you are supposed to sit there without a bond if the court feels that you are a danger to society or to the alleged victim, and as a flight risk. That's the only thing it's supposed to do. Secure your presence in court and ensure that we're not letting somebody out who may be a danger to society. People have lauded the cash bail system as almost a penalization for the poor. If you got to pay to play. If you don't have the cash to do it, then guess what? You sit in jail regardless of your guilt or innocence. And the law has already said it's not supposed to be punitive in nature. However, many people say that it is punitive in nature. The interesting thing about this particular case, though, over in California, is that they have traded in the cashless or the cash bail system for one that's a risk assessment point-based system, which means that a judge still has the final say-so on if that person is going to be let out. However, they look at certain factors with that person. If it's a misdemeanor, a lot of times they say, you know what, it's a misdemeanor offense, we're going to let you go. When you get into your more serious crimes, dangerous crimes, your felonies, then they start to look at your flight risk, they start to look at your criminal history, they start to look at a lot of things. Is this a righteous move, or are they simply placing one for the other on this one?
What do you mean by a righteous move?
Well, because everybody was on board with this, getting rid of the cashless or the cash-based system before. In its final iteration, there were a lot of people, watchdog groups, that said, whoa, we're no longer on board with this.
Basically, what I was saying was we have the same system here in Harris County. It's supposed to eliminate racial bias by some of the questions. It doesn't include income-based things that traditionally low economic people won't have or not included in this PSA. It's supposed to just include criminal history, that kind of thing. That being said, if in California they have a system like that is as close to eliminating bias on an economic and racial scale as possible, then I'm fine with a cashless system. The downfall to it, the only problem is that some people may not get released. Some people may just get stuck in jail that would otherwise catch a bond. So if this PSA says you're ultra dangerous, you're charged with an offense to children or a homicide or some sort of aggravated like kidnapping, that kind of thing, you might just get held in jail until your case is resolved, where you would have called a bond and had at least a chance to bond out. So, if it eliminates the bias in all forms or as close as all forms, then I'm cool with it. But if not, then it's still a step in the right direction because it doesn't allow poor people to stay in jail for nominal or for dumb shit.
I think the main sector that it really helps, is going to be the misdemeanor recipients. It's going to be almost automatic for misdemeanor defendants to be released on pretrial. You're still going to have the issues with your felony suspects that are still having to go through the rigmarole of trying to figure out, does this judge think that I'm qualified to get out of here? I don't know how long that qualification is going to take. Usually, as soon as they set a bond, if you wanted to, you could post it immediately. So I don't know what kind of backlog they're going to have now if the judge is the one doing the risk assessment in every single case.
Well, I would say, I'm like Damon, I'm comparing it to what we're doing here in Harris County. Risk assessments on felonies aren't even happening. So if you sit there and I have a judge and I have a risk assessment before this judge, and that's what it sounds like is going to happen in California, then this judge has to really give real reasons as to why he's not signing off on this. Because that's what's happening in Harris County. If the risk assessment says you are low risk and there's no reason for you not to get a bond, then that judge has to justify why they are not letting you go. So I applaud that if that's going to happen in California, because unfortunately here in Houston, it's only happening at the misdemeanor level. It hasn't expanded to the felony level, because we all know we have had clients, their first offense. Right. Felony, it might be a low-level felony. I represented a young lady recently on marijuana. Seriously, we're not even doing a whole bunch with marijuana. but at the same time, she still had to put a bond up. She was not a risk, but we're not doing it in felony court. So I applaud Jerry Brown. He's doing some other stuff. He did something amazing today. I can't even remember what it was, but he did another great thing, and I kind of thought, he's positioning himself to make sure he is in California for a long time.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's tried running for president several times.
Right.
What were you gonna say, Quentin?
I was gonna say I agree with her on this because now you have benchmarks, right? You have as long as you define this risk assessment tool that you're going to use to do this correctly, then it's going to be a lot harder for people to not follow those rules, or it's going to be easier to trace the crooked people that's in the system, right? Because now you can go back and say, well, why did you rule this way, or why did you decide to do it this way? Versus, Cash that puts so many people in a bind from the jump.
Charles, you look like you want to say something to the contrary.
Maybe a little bit. I think it might be 2 steps forward and maybe a step back, because I know the ACLU kind of pulled back on their support, because when I think about it, I think it's a good thing, right? You get rid of that, you give some guidelines, but you still ultimately put the decision in someone who could possibly be an elected official and thinking, well, if I let this person out, how's that going to affect me in my upcoming election? Somebody could use that against me if it's a felon. Somebody could use that against me and say, well, you let this person out on bond and they went out and they did something else. So all those things play into the bias factor that can still go on. I think there needs to be another step where there is either, there has to be like stricter guidelines and more of an algorithm in place to say these types of crimes and the way they fit, they'll be available, people will be available to get bond that way, because it still seems like we know there's inherent bias in the system at the judge, at that judicial level, where judges just look at people and, a black marijuana user versus a white marijuana user can just look at them and say, well, I just decided this because I think it's best. So I definitely think getting rid of Money Bail is the way to go, but I still think there's some work to be done.
Dantrice, I see you nodding your head. Is there anything you want to add before I move on?
I'm weary about any laws that are passed, regardless when it comes to, especially for black people, because they never really play in our favor. It's always something in them that negatively works against us. And so I'm glad that they got rid of the cash system because it was awful. But now you just have the judges who have the final say. And I just can't see that going well for black people, no matter what their charge is.
It doesn't go well for us now.
Right.
Yeah, it's one of those ones like it's not really a win. It's good that it's an improvement, but it's not as for our people. I don't see it as something that's really just a move ahead for us, because if the judge has the final say.
Well, one thing I think it gives you now, though, it gives you data to run, and you can look at trends, right? Because what we have now is you have this cash system, and you don't really know a lot of times why they set bonds to where they set them, right?
And Harris County is just a chart.
Yeah.
It's a chart. This is what you're charged with. You've got this criminal history. It's just a chart. And so judges always follow. You've got to take a lot for them to not follow the bond scale
I believe
that they've
this,
always had. Yeah. But now I think that they are more willing. And the problem that I have with what you said is the concept of what you said, was it Charles? Mm-hmm. Charles, was that what they're charged with. Let's just be honest. Just because somebody's charged, they're innocent until proven guilty. So I don't understand this. I understand that if you're charged with murder or you're charged with aggravated assault, in people's mind, it sounds so much more serious.
Right.
But those of us that do it all the time, I had a case. I had a guy that was charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon because he hit a person with a coffee mug. That was the wrong charge. But yet on the system, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, his bond should be $30,000. Really? You hit somebody with a coffee mug? Yeah. Because it was all messed up. But so I disagree with that the charge is not always appropriate, or judges are still afraid to let someone out and sign off on a bond if someone was charged with something that sounds heinous.
And to kind of answer your question, there actually is a rubric in place, guys. Like it's not just you get in or get out. The judge has to follow some sort of guidelines. There is there is at least in Harris County, there's a schedule.
Well, that's what she just said, though.
A rule book about.
Yeah, I think we ought to do this.
I mean, you trying to take her shine?
No,
Let her shine, son.
We are working together.
Dang.
Add to it.
that's my boy. That's my boy.
Thank you. It's my partner.
I mean,
It's my partner, all right?
to reiterate the iteration. I'm just saying.
In a different way.
All right, well let's move forward because we gotta really get into what we here today to talk about. But students in Colorado, in the Colorado school district, will no longer be going to class on Mondays. I sure wish I was.
I wish
I was.
I was
Oh my God, boy! If I now the reason for this is an effort for the school district to save nearly $1 million. They have over 18,000 students in Aurora, which is over there in Colorado. They're going to give a lot of these students under 12 years old, $30 a day for child care services for those Mondays. First of all, is this putting an undue burden on parents?
Yes.
Definitely.
Parent of four here.
Yes.
That being said, do we really need 5 full days of school?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm not talking about
No.
and
No.
some.
Okay,
So,
let me
can I
say this
speak
much.
here?
I'm gonna say it's both. I'm gonna say this much. It's a burden on parents, but the reality is that they could be a little bit more productive in their in the schooling. I mean, I get that. And then you're talking about, I'm still confused as to really how much this is saving them that much money.
Right.
What are they confused? What I
For
talked to someone
busing.
today. They said busing, that the schools are really shut down, that nobody is there. They're saving on the power. They're saving on some other things. But really, is it? I want to see the numbers. I want to see the numbers.
Dantrice, what?
I lived in another country. I lived in South Korea for 2 years.
To South Korea? Okay.
And my husband's former military. And those kids' school schedules are rigorous. And they're some of the happiest children you'll ever see. And so
But then South Korea have like the highest suicide rate as well?
in adults.
Oh, okay. So once they matriculate, they start killing themselves.
Right.
Okay. All right. All right. We're gonna focus on the future.
Yeah. And that's also a lot of the newer generation, the older generation that are really suicidal as well. But when we moved back to the States, we saw just the big difference just in how they do education and whatnot. And so, Texas is really a teach-to-test state. And so, former teacher here is one of those things where you kind of look at it, they could be more productive, but then the teachers are kind of stuck. So, their jobs are based on their students passing. What is it now? The test.
Whichever the standardized
Whatever the
test
standardized
is.
test is,
Right.
yeah. And that's harder on the teachers, and so then the students are basically. It's one of those things where I don't know if Colorado is one of those states. I didn't get to read up on that part, but if they are, and you're reducing it to 4-day weeks, then you're actually hindering your students as well because.
Well, they're increasing the
But they're
school
longer
day.
the days.
It's like a
And
10-hour
I like
day.
that part. I like the part because I'm sorry, the kids getting out at 3:30. That's a problem for parents.
Yeah.
It's a lot
You're
that can happen
paying.
between
You're
that
paying.
time
I
and
know as a
home.
parent, when my kids got out at 3:30 as a single mom, you had that extra expense
Yeah.
of that after school care. If they stay till 5, which makes much more sense to me, that I can get them
Yeah,
after
because-
work. We can do that. We can cut that expense.
For 3
So
kids,
in
right.
the end, cutting the expense of aftercare 4 days a week to having 1 day a week, that we got to figure something out. I don't know.
Yeah, it's also one of those. 'Cause, for us, we have 3 kids in after school, and that's like 3 something a week. So
Right.
it's one of those, and they need to be in after school because we have shit to do. So
Right.
But
But if they stayed in school till 5,
they're saying in school till 5. But then here's the thing, though. I want to know what teacher's going to be willing to do that.
well, they are because they have Friday off. So somebody asked, and somebody on there commented,
Is
are they
it Friday
cutting
off or Monday off?
I'm sorry, they have Monday off. So they're not cutting the teachers' pay. The teachers are working their normal thing. They just work longer 4 days a week. That's no different than what corporations are doing now with their four-day work weeks.
Yeah.
That they have longer days. I know people that I'm jealous about. They're like, oh, I work 4 10s.
Yeah, we do that. We have that option at my job.
Yeah.
But what
I
about
can work 4 10s.
my whole thing is the $30 reimbursement. How is that going to be given? Is it going to be a voucher? Is the state going to be paying the daycares? So how are they going to be paid on time?
Or am I paying it and then waiting for you to
And
pay
being
me back?
reimbursed?
Y'all asking too many questions. Why you asking all this? I can't just be happy with knowing you about to get on right here.
I mean, but you have to, as a parent, you got to think about stuff like
You
that.
make this decision for me, and
But
so
it
I
sounds
need
like
to
y'all
know.
are more worried about parental convenience rather than
Than the
school
actual
and
impact of
student
what they're
No,
convenience.
no. I'm worried about school impacts too, because I'm always going to be concerned about my children's education. So I need to know that you're extending these hours. Are these just extended hours for you to just teach them more for the standardized tests? I get frustrated when my kids come home with their homework, and I'm a former teacher, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, this is all.
But that has nothing to do with the
So-
time. That has nothing to do with
Well,
truncating the time. Though.
so
That's
you
about
want
that's about the
to see
systemic.
curriculum
Hold on,
change.
hold on,
But it's
hold
not a
on.
curriculum issue, it's a funding
it's
issue.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
It's a
This-
funding
this-
issue.
right. There was no study done, no feasibility on whether 4 days at 10 hours is better than 5 days at 8 hours. None of that stuff was done. It was just, we need to save money, and so
Yeah.
we're going to do it this way.
But if
Now-
you can
And
do
there are other
that,
states
but-
that are doing it.
but
There are
the-
other
but there
counties
hasn't
that are
been
doing
any
it. It's
studies
not doing
done
it.
on
See,
it.
the difference is they're talking about this because this is statewide, but there are a lot of counties that are in small areas that are already doing it. Like the conversation happened today because my friend said, "Oh, they've been doing that in Oklahoma, where I grew up for the longest. They've been doing."
And
4
Oklahoma's
days
one of the
for
dumbest
months."
states in this
I'm
country.
just-
I mean, if we're going to use Oklahoma as a guide path
I'm
to what
just
schools should be
saying.
doing, then we should definitely go back to
but is
5
it
days
the
a
amount
week.
of time that they spend in school, or what's being taught?
I mean,
to them?
so one thing kids need is structure, and they need that. They need to know.
Yes.
They need to have a set pattern. You think it's opposite to happiness for a child, but kids, they need to know structure. And when they run a bound, their minds wander. There's no discipline. They need structure. 5 days a week, provided the structure. You know, every Monday you go to class, you get your lessons, and you leave. If they had the feasibility and they did some studies and actually proved that 4 days a week worked, then I don't think anybody would be opposed to it.
Well, then
So
there
then
are a lot of
saying that they
studies
did
that
it.
show that 4 days a week for workers is much more efficient and much more productive for.
Yeah,
there are a
But
lot of
our
studies
brains are
that-
developed.
Wait,
We're
wait,
adults.
This
A
is,
child
this is
is
what we're
developed.
doing, Damon. We are putting our mindset. This is the way we always did it. So this works. Sometimes shit don't work that way. It doesn't mean like we for the longest, we as kids, our parents whooped our asses. They get the switch, go get the switch. That didn't work out too good.
Yeah,
Okay,
I agree with that.
It
It
didn't work
totally
out too
worked
good.
out.
No.
And wait. Then the opposite end, the timeout shit didn't work out too good.
worked
So
also.
we've all got to sit there and say,
Yeah, but-
just because it's always done that way doesn't
mean
mean
it's-
that it's
No,
right.
I get
Charles,
what you're
hold on,
saying.
Charles. What do you got to say on that?
Number one, driving educational resources, curriculum, and all that behind finances. That's one thing that jumps out to me as I don't know, beyond the problems it's going to cause parents, to look at these changes and just be focused on the money it's going to save. That kind of sounds off to me. And then the second thing is we're talking about children, so I'll just send them to school a little bit longer. You can't get grown people to focus for the amount of time when they, we a lot of people. I work 14s and I'm off Friday, but how much actual work do you get done? Like, how much are you doing? How long? I mean, now there are real studies that show how long people can focus and actually maintain focus and take information in and actually absorb that information. So just sitting them in class a little bit longer and saying, okay, well, we save money and they're gonna get everything done. As a parent, and I've raised children that are already in postgraduate studies. I know how long kids can focus, and it ain't all damn day in class and then go home and do homework just to say, okay, now you got Monday off and you can recharge and do. Nah, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. It's a money grab.
People don't work anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Friday,
Thursday at 2.
Go in the office on Friday, going as hard as
Thursday at
they
2,
will.
I start working.
I would
Friday,
still be in jail.
2
I'd
o'clock.
be in jail at 3 or 4 o'clock on Fridays. I've been
Yeah,
there on a
that's-
Saturday visiting clients. I
I know. You
so
and I are rare, but most part.
In a corporate America setting, nobody's doing nothing on Friday. Nobody's going as hard on Fridays as they are on Tuesday and Wednesday.
This is how you could really tell if parents are really worried about themselves or if they're worried about the students. If you started switching some of those days for online work days, let's see how much of an uproar it would cause to the parents. Because at the end of the day, it's supposed to be about the students learning, right? And
I like that idea.
that's
Brandon.
only part of it. This whole parent convenience, part of a child's upbringing is parent convenience. I mean, you have to create a happy home for your children. All right, if mom and dad are stressing about money all the damn time, studies have also shown that kids don't progress well when they can see a financial struggle in the household. So yeah, this impacts children, but it also impacts parents. So
Calm down, David.
No, I would not calm down. Calming up.
When you start talking about your pockets, all of a sudden
Stop talking about my kids. You ask for a ride, you got a ride. So part of this is going to be about parents as well, because you are directly impacting parents. And if I have to struggle to take care of my kids just one extra day, they will see that, and they will see the stress in me, and that will impact them as well.
It's funny that you bring up the parents in that regard, because, and we're going to talk about this in a subsequent show, there is a question of how much parenting should teachers be attributed to, because we've placed parents in this almost secondary role to teachers, and have teachers taking on the primary role of caregiver and parental unit at the school.
Dumbest teacher lie I've ever heard. That's a teacher lie, right?
No
No offense.
That's a teacher lie.
Hold on.
I can't wait till you say that.
And I spend more time with your
Well,
kid,
hold
and
on.
that's
Wait
bullshit.
a minute.
They spend time.
Former teacher here, because during
they
the
see
school
my
year,
child. They don't spend more. No, I'm sorry.
No.
Being
They
in the
do
presence
spend more
of
time with
You
our
get
children.
8 hours of sleep with your child. Are
So
you really saying
being,
that?
being in the presence of my child is not spending time with my child, because you're in the presence of 15 other kids also.
Okay, so maybe
Right, you're not-
spending time with is the wrong term, but as a former teacher and just as for my children, I appreciate my children's teachers, because they are with my children more than I am during the school year. So I'm not going to negate that from them. I'm not going to take that from them. They are with them more.
Well, we're gonna table that for now, because again, we want to bring the teachers on the show, and Damon can
battle with
spew all these hatred rhetoric to them.
Courtney on the show. She
But
was
moving
here.
right along, this is the last topic we're going to talk about before we get into the topics du jour. Colin, Mr. Kaepernick, he has been lauded now, as of I think today was when they came out with this. Nike has pushed forward their campaign, saying that he is going to be one of the new faces for their Nike campaign. Matter of fact, not only is he now going to be, but apparently Nike had been paying him during his respite from football this whole time. Here we are thinking that, man, this boy is struggling out here in these streets.
He was
You know,
Nobody
and
thought
Nike
he was
has been
struggling.
paying him almost under the table. I mean, and people are in an uproar about this. And by people, I mean they have the caucasity to feel like angered by this, saying that we are going to burn Nike jerseys.
Exactly.
We are ripping off the Nike checks. I ain't doing it no more. I just won't. So it's not a just
They
do
always
it.
So,
mad
look,
about something.
For every one of them that's burning Nikes, we're going to go out and we're going
we
to
gonna
buy
buy
2
we
or
have
3
proven
of
if
them.
we can't do nothing else.
Let me say this
our
much.
power
This is going to be a show of the power of the black dollar. We all know how strong it is, and if we can join together, the difference that we can make. And I applaud Nike for understanding and getting it. And Nike saying, and let me be honest, I don't think it's just a social conscious issue. They are about the dollar. It is a corporation.
Oh,
yeah.
And Nike has figured out, despite everything, and the articles have shown that they have been backing Serena because they see
yes.
the money. Okay? And I think they were smart enough to say, like, we're making all this money from backing Serena. Because, you know, she got her Nike, she got her Chase, she had, despite all the negative that the others, the other people are saying, we're going out there and seeing this, and it makes us want to wear Nike. Makes us want to support it more.
Exactly.
Right.
And if in the end, Nike was smart enough to say, we might lose some people,
But we're gonna gain.
but we're going to gain a lot more.
You know what's funny about that? It brings up a dichotomy of situations where you have to juxtapose Nike as a retailer versus the owners of the teams. They have 2 different commodities that they're selling, and they have 2 different purchasers. You've got Nike as a retailer who their main source of income is going to be these minority communities that we already know that black dollars and minority dollars are heavily used in all facets of retail, beauty, fashion, all of those things. So we already know that Nike has probably weighed and considered who is going to be their biggest dollar bringers to them. Conversely, you've got teams where their draw is bringing in individuals, and more than likely their constituents are going to be the majority individuals who actually go to those games. So, you know, you've got on one hand the Jerry Jones saying, well, I can't have people not coming to my stadium anymore because those people are the people who are upset, versus Nike saying, well, we can cater to this other demographic because we know that their dollars are more focused on us. So it's almost a battle of of trying to weigh your options of who is my demand at this point in terms of dollars.
And let me say this much, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but the negative impact of that is, the unfortunate part is that we as African Americans are disposable consumers, meaning they already know we like to buy name brands, we like to floss, we like to look good, and that's where our money goes. That's the sad part about it, that we're going to spend money on Nike before we're going to buy some season tickets to it.
But that's not just a black. I think that's a
disagree.
minority.
I'm sorry, I
disagree a
think
bit.
it's a minority
I disagree
thing.
a little bit about talking about the
That's a
owners.
whole other topic.
The NFL owners, because I think the NFL owners might say it'll affect the customers. I don't think it'll affect people that watch football. You might lose a few people that really, I'm going to take a stand behind this kneeling thing. People that watch football are going to watch football, just like the people that say they're not going to watch football because of Colin Kaepernick. A bunch of people are going to watch football anyway. The people that they're worried about offending are their peers. The people with money, like they have money, the people that they do other businesses with. They're not worried about the rank and file customer, because NFL is America. People are going to watch football no matter what. Yep. They're not worried about concussions. They're not worried about Colin Kaepernick. And the people that say they're going to boycott Nike, that's just that loud minority that you hear online. Yeah. It ain't messing with Nike's bottom line.
And truth be told, the people I know who would boycott Nike don't buy Nike anyways. I mean, seriously, the people I know who are very anti-Kaepernick,
when I boycott Starbucks, I don't go
they don't buy
anyway.
Nike anyways. So
They're
it's easy
not
to say no.
losing anything.
Well, and black people have already shown a propensity to not really. We no longer hold to the ethic of supporting the boycott system. Talk about the Cowboys right now. As much as Jerry Jones has shown us that we are simply niggas to him,
all
black
up in
Cowboy
there.
fans.
I saw people go through. I saw people go through a litany of emotions on their timelines. I can't believe this. I hate as hard. I've been a Cowboy fan for all my life. My daddy was a Cowboy. My daddy's daddy. My grandpappy's daddy. All these people were Cowboys fans, and then give them a week worth of settling down. Well, I just don't ride with Jerry, but I'm still gonna be with my boys. It's like we don't even know how to stay righteously upset with something long enough for it to take effect, which is a whole nother issue.
But so this whole boycott thing on both sides, real boycotts have some change that they're trying to make. That's a real change. Like the bus boycotts, like those boycotts, people boycotted for real change. What is boycotting the Dallas Cowboys going to do? Like, if you really think about it, if every black person said we're not going to watch the Cowboys, we're not gonna buy any apparel, and we're not going to go to the games. NFL,
it will show the power of our people.
It might show. It's going to show power, but it's not going to change behavior. What behavior will it change?
Oh, I'm sorry.
What behavior will it
I
change?
totally disagree.
Yeah, it won't.
If everybody that was a black Cowboy fan, if we could ever stick together, which we
Jerry
can't,
would feel that.
Jerry
He
would
would not.
feel
He
it.
would feel it.
He would feel it, and it would make
He
it.
would not. Let
He
me
has
tell
a
you
board
what-
of directors. He has people that, in the end, if it affects them in their pocket, the problem is it doesn't affect them in their pocket because we can't be true and we can't be loyal and we can't come
let's say
together
in a
and boycott.
perfect world that happens. What change then happens? Then he just comes out and says, "Okay, y'all can kneel now." He's not doing anything to help. He's not putting any money behind.
It's not
the
even
cause.
just about Jerry,
He's not
though.
allowing people. Just saying that you gotta stand up, and then I say, "Oh, y'all boycott me." Okay, well y'all can kneel now. That's still not helping the cause. That's why I'm saying the boycott thing is a wrong idea anyway, because you need to be focused. People are focused too much on the kneeling anyway.
It
The
sends the
kneeling
message.
is
We were
not.
just talking
The kneeling
about
is
the
not what
15
you need to be
years
focused on.
that the cop got. We were just
Because
talking about
everybody
the
that
same
says they
thing.
boycott,
It's
ain't
the
nobody
same
getting out in the
concept.
streets. Ain't nobody getting out in the streets and helping.
Here's two things that I think that it highlights when you talk about boycotting. And you're speaking specifically to the Cowboys. Number one, Jerry has basically called us out and played a game of chicken, saying at the end of the day, I will win this game of chicken. He's bullying us socially. At some point, we have to take the challenge of being bullied and say,
Meet 'em head
you
on.
can't bully us in that way. At the very least, what it does is sends a message to him and others that starts the tone to say, well, hey, this isn't business as usual, because now they're starting to coordinate the same way they did back in the 60s. Because for the last 50 years, we haven't been doing that. The second thing is it now gives us an opportunity to practice that coordination that we've been lacking for the last 40, 50 years. We have forgotten how to be cohesive in our approach of going out and pinpointing a problem and saying that we are going to collectively and unitedly face this problem together and come up with a solution on how to fix
People
it.
have lost sight of the problem, Brent.
I don't think we have.
I don't think it's more of they've done a good job of pacifying us enough to keep us from uniting, man.
They won't let people kneel, and they don't even know what the fuck they're kneeling about.
I disagree with that. I think that that's speaking to the rhetoric that's being put out by the media. We've made this. The media has talked about this as kneeling, but we still know at the end of the day what the purpose of the kneeling was
Black
about.
people still know.
The Cowboys are they don't market towards black people. They never have. When Jerry Jones became owner, one of the biggest things he did was went south of Texas into Mexico, into other states like that, and made Cowboys America's team. Not just North America, but South America as well. I've been to Mexico, and I've seen plenty of Hispanic people with a Dallas Cowboys hat. Probably have never watched the Cowboys.
But why would you need to do
Hold
that
on.
if
The
the fan
point
base is
I'm
already
making
big?
the fan base is for Cowboys. If black people, and I agree with Chuck here, if black people stop watching Cowboys, Jones won't care because he never banked on our dollar anyways.
He was
We were the
already
cherry on
making
the
our
top.
dollar, though.
We were the cherry on top. He's banking on the white dollars he still gets and the Hispanic dollars he still gets.
But why
that's
would
not
you?
going anywhere.
That's not. That don't make sense. Why would I market to somebody if I already have your money? I already have your money. Why would I cater my marketing to you?
Because
Why would
because-
I go?
Because that base wants him to take the stand he
How much
took.
how much
That
how
base
much of
is
the revenue
saying,
do you think
that.
comes from the black? I mean, this is the Cowboys
I
are
have no
easily a
idea.
$1 billion business. You have to at least consider that we make up at
200
least
million at least.
10 to 20.
20%?
I would say at least 10 to 15% come from the black community.
I don't know
If
about
you're talking about 10 to 15%, just as because I know they make more than $1 billion in revenue, that's $100 million to $150 million a year that the black community could possibly represent. You don't think as a businessman you are worried about losing 10% of your bottom line
If
income?
you're not worried
If I
about
thought
it, if you
10%
sit
was
there
it,
and
but I
think
don't think we're
that I've
10%
got to
of his
cut
income.
my loss.
No, I don't
if
think
I
we're
sit
10%
there
I'm
and
talking
say,
about his
if I'm
income.
going to lose 5% versus if I take this other stand, the stand that he's taking now, if I lose 5% of the black people, oh well. Versus
Right.
if I take
But-
the stand that I'm taking now, that I'll lose 20% of the white business.
Bam.
That's his bottom line.
But
We're
that's-
disposable.
that's-
Our income is disposable. He don't want it. He don't care. Yeah, he's gonna lose some money. Who cares?
Yeah,
All right,
that's not how
last
they-
thing, Charles.
Okay, very quick thing. They don't care about ticket sales. Doesn't mean anything. The NFL, Jerry Jones makes money because of 10-year, multi-billion-dollar television contracts, stadium revenue, all kinds of concerts and things that go on. Like if you really want to boycott some NFL team for their stands, then you need to boycott every advertiser on every network that shows those teams. You need to boycott every concert that goes on in that stadium. You need to boycott every licensee of them outside. Like that's where the boycott needs to happen. Because if you just say we're not going to the games and we're not watching on TV, that is not even a small percentage of the money that
I agree.
NFL
I agree with you. I agree with you. But part of that problem is we aren't savvy enough on where those streams come from, and I think that these leaders that we talk about, the Al Sharptons, the Jesse Jacksons, and the New Age NAACP members, they have to do more to make us aware and take away the ignorance that we have in that.
I need just one more thing. I know we got to wrap up, but we also have to, as people of color or people that really want to take a stand, we have to agree to be as uncomfortable as our foreparents were when they had to walk instead of take the bus, when they had to figure out other ways. Because most people won't be uncomfortable
That's
enough
true.
to be like, I ain't gonna eat McDonald's no more. Right. Well, you're like, oh wait a minute, I got to stop eating McDonald's. I got to stop doing all this stuff that I like to do. Like that's the real thing.
I hear
Who's
you,
gonna
but
get
it's
uncomfortable?
hot in Houston. I don't know if I want to just be walking down the streets of Houston like that. It's hot and it's muggy.
Montgomery was too.
That being said, the divisiveness that we're talking about translates itself within our own community. Time and time again, we have seen that we, as black people, have failed to come together cohesively for an extended amount of time. And what I mean by that is, in times of the greatest of peril, we have shown that we can be a cohesive group for the most part. There's always going to be outliers, but once the hard hitting issue is gone, then we fracture again. And part of that is because we have been indoctrinated with this term that we call colorism, meaning with it, there's external racism where people from the outside continuously show bigoted emotions towards a minority group. Specifically, we're going to be talking about the Black American culture. However, there is an internal racism that happens, and that's where you get this idea of colorism, in which Black people have fractured themselves into the light skins versus the brown skins. If you go back to the Spike Lee movie, School Days, it's the jigaboos versus the wannabes, good or bad hair, see if I care. And it has become it's been indoctrinated with us since the first rape victim happened, and in colonial slave America, where you had the first light-skinned baby come out here, and all of a sudden that got to be the house Negro, and then you separated that from the field Negro, and we've had this perpetuation of colorism since then. Can we blame, or not even blame, can we be that hard-pressed with white America and their racism towards us when we can't even get past our own internal racism?
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dantrice. You said that with the quickness.
You can't. One doesn't cancel out the other. They're still racist bastards, and we still have our own issues. They're our issues, and we have to deal with them on our own. But that doesn't negate their bullshit. That's still on them. They still judge us no matter what shade of brown we are still niggas in their eyes, and we are still Black, and they still see us less. And I'm not gonna sit here and say, oh, we can't really down them for their thoughts just because we got colorism issues within us. Nah, fuck that. They racist.
I mean,
period.
they are, but at some point we have to hold ourselves accountable. It's hard for us to say, well, you can't be talking to us like this, when we basically destroy ourselves in terms of how we view each other. We don't know. We do a hard job of holding each other up, and we've consistently done a hard job of it. And sometimes it's regional, sometimes it's national. I mean, how many times have we had this discussion about light skins being the best, or getting privileges that the dark skins don't get, and then the dark skins saying, wait, we the ones out here struggling, and the light skins saying, well, no, we've got our own set of problems.
Well, I'm confused on why you feel as though those two have to correlate with each other. Why is it that because we have issues with colorism that we should give white people a pass for that?
No one has said give them a pass at all. What I'm saying is, we have to fix our internal issues if we want to go at them with the same type of fervor that we deserve to go at them with.
But they started it.
You can tell both of them no. You can say no to both.
I think you can work in parallel, meaning like you have family, and your family has issues within your family, but at the same time, you're not going to just disregard what's going on.
Exactly.
I'm not going to let nobody. But well, so this is the thing. You're not going to let anybody from the outside attack your family just because you have issues within your family. So I feel like the whole light skin versus dark skin thing, like she's saying, I think what she's saying is that can be worked out internally. But at the same time, I think the bigger issue is external racism, because that's what really keeps us from progressing forward. And
racism is important, but colorism is, it's just as important. Like, people's proximity to whiteness is something that they hold dear to them, as well as a lot of people want to be the gatekeeper to what is Black and what is Black enough.
Yes.
So you can sweep in front of your own porch while still making sure the rest of the street is maintained as well. You can do both.
Okay, I might be a little naive, and I'm a little confused here. It's colorism is still a problem. I'm sorry.
Very much a problem.
Seems like you feel like a true red
Let me say, you see the two yellow saying, "What do you?" I don't
Life is great.
Very much a problem. Very much still a problem.
So wait, let me ask. Why do you ask that question?
Because I guess I don't see it. It's not in my life. I don't see it with my people. I have not seen a product. In years, don't get me wrong. As a child, it was an issue. As a youth, it was an issue. But now that I'm grown and over 50, I in my peers, we have grown and we have developed and we are intellectual enough to know that it doesn't make any difference in the people around me.
Do you think that it has something to do with what you just said was with my peers? You are in a certain socioeconomic status that is separated from a lower socioeconomic status where it is still prevalent no matter the age discrepancy. I mean, you're talking about 50-year-olds in southern Mississippi that still have that colorism issue, that tell their grandchild. Hold on, they will still tell their grandchild, you need to go get you one of these yellow bones,
it's
son.
True. I think it's a classism
all that is
issue.
true, but to Rod's point, and I can't read all of Rod's comment, correlating colorism to white racism are not even in the same. It's
No, it's correlated.
It's not, it's, well, saying that we have to deal with, like, there's no light-skinned people couldn't vote either. Like all the systemic things that came out of racism and white privilege, colorism doesn't even get close to being a systemic thing that takes away people's rights, that keep people at a certain level. I think it may be, some people's ignorance when they talk about people and look at people in a certain way, but they're not redlining and saying only light-skinned people can live in this neighborhood. Like, that's not.
Some
that's
people,
not the shit that's happening.
colorism can affect you in those ways. There's been studies that show some corporations, they prefer to hire lighter skinned people than darker skinned people. Like I said, it's a proximity to whiteness that is keeping, and which also allows somebody of lighter hues to be like, oh, well, I don't really see colorism that much or like that.
Sound like a slug. Hold on one second.
No,
Damon wants to talk about that slug.
I mean, I'm pretty,
over
like,
to Juanita.
I'm not. And another thing is like, I don't necessarily, when it comes to the talk about colorism, I don't necessarily like to take up space for that because it doesn't affect me like it would someone like DeAndre. I could be, but some people, people call me light skinned, and I'm like, no.
But that's what I'm saying. When you say it
But it can.
All right, Charles, hold on. We got Damon wants to say something on this. Damon, go ahead.
What I would say is probably being one of the more darker people on this panel.
Probably.
I'm proud of that, though. I'm actually with Juanita here. I don't know if I've experienced a lot of colorism outside of joking amongst people. Me saying I don't like yellow bones or red bones are cool, and the same thing amongst my peers has been a joke. But I don't think in my life I can say I've really experienced it on colorism. Now, I've experienced from black people sort of educational racism, like you're uppy nigga, you too smart, whatever, that kind of bullshit, or you act white, that kind of nonsense. But I haven't really experienced we don't like you because you're dark situation.
So it's funny
that
you.
So
what I would say is I would definitely think that our generation, be it whatever economic status, may not suffer the same as, no offense, Juanita's earlier generation, because they came out of a time period where race was
Well, you know what's funny about that comment though.
Different ballgame than 2018.
You know what's funny about that comment? I actually had this conversation with somebody yesterday. Because I told them we were going to be talking about this. In my opinion, colorism plays itself out more in terms of gender than it does.
It does.
And what I mean by that is that it affects women more than it affects the men within the black culture. I think that for women, you see the divisive culture play out in the light skin versus dark skin in terms of who's more attractive, who's more likely to be accepted, who is what we consider to be the ideal looking woman. Men get it to a degree. I'm not going to say we don't get it, but I think it plays itself out far more pervasively within the female culture than it does in the male culture.
So that may be true for 2018.
It's true.
But as a young, dark-skinned guy growing up in the 80s, let me tell you, it was because it's more of a social thing, right? I believe it only impacts us, well, I'm not going to say only, but majority it impacts us from a social standpoint. Oh, I don't want to deal with y'all, or I won't want to date you. But yes, I mean, back in the day when Al B. Sure and them dudes was doing their thing, we was not in. In the 80s, we was not in.
But you were still getting shows.
You were still getting shows.
You were still getting shows, though. Here's the thing.
No, ma'am. No, we was not.
But here's the thing, though. Is you have somebody like me who's a dark-skinned girl, and I have a daughter who's even darker than me. And, you know, I remember just even as an adult in college, it took a long time for me to even feel pretty because while my mother would tell me I'm pretty and guys who I dated, you know, would tell me I'm pretty, I wasn't the girl that was chose. And I'm not downplaying anybody. If you get a girl who could be lighter skinned than me and wasn't necessarily as cute as somebody would say to me, but she was getting chose because she was light skinned with the good hair. And you know what that can do to a girl's self esteem? Right. How I'm in the mirror checking myself like, dang, what do I need to do?
Right.
To look?
But don't you see it changing though?
No,
I don't see
I
it
think it
changing.
is.
I don't
I
see
think
it
it is.
No, because my 10-year-old daughter comes home wanting to bleach her skin because her friends who are lighter get told that they're pretty and she gets called dark.
The same. Look, I'm
no.
raising a dark skinned daughter as somebody who's, you know, her father, like, his nickname is Midnight. Like,
You dating
dark.
Quentin?
You know what I'm saying? So I've had to deal as well. Like, I've had my daughter, you know, ask me, well, how come my skin isn't, you know, well, how come I look more like daddy and not more like you? You know, so you have to deal with that as well. I also think it's a generational thing. Like, the access that we have now, our generation, to all social media, Twitter, Instagram, and the things that the media puts out, these images. So back then, in previous generations, of course, colorism has always been around, but it was not so in your face.
Yeah.
So you can log on and you can literally see people talking about how they don't mess with dark skinned girls because they equate them to roaches.
Light skinned girls are mean.
I mean, and they
Yeah,
all
yeah,
have
it's always been
But
that.
it's like you said,
And I'm
when-
like nothing like that. So why would you say that?
and it's classism as well. Like when your peers that you may hang around who may be far more intellectual than some, you know, some of the knots. You know what I'm saying? So you may not experience that, but some people who are, you know, classy ratchet, you know, such as myself.
Yes.
You know, you got one
Is it
in
class
Own
C
it.
or class?
classy ratchet. Class.
Not to be confused with classical ratchet.
Classical ratchet works as well. So you can see both sides, and I think it's important you have to acknowledge those things.
Yes.
Especially when you have your children coming to you asking you or just doing things like my daughter will. The images that she puts in front of her when she's on social media, and I have to ask her, well, why are you looking up this girl but not this girl? Or what makes you gravitate towards this white girl who wants to look black, but you don't gravitate to
The black girl.
these
who's already
black
looking
girls?
like
I have
you.
to disagree a little bit when you specified that it's colorism is being or light skins are being highlighted more in social media today. I really think a little bit of the opposite. I think Jonae.
I'm not saying that they're highlighted.
Hold on. Jonae Parrish actually said something to that. She said it goes both ways. Dark skinned girls get more press thanks to social. I'm assuming social media too. I mean, but
But is that a bad
the
thing?
colorism? No, it's not a bad
No,
thing.
but
What I'm saying,
that's now.
colorism
That's
is
within
not
the last
some.
3 years.
Colorism is not a new concept. Colorism has been around. I mean, that goes back to feudal Asiatic cultures where it's always been a matter of the lighter you are, it assumed that you had a higher standing in the society because the people that were darker skinned were the ones who were outside doing the field work. The ones who were lighter skinned were inside doing that work. You talk about even now. Where they put on the powder, onto their skin to be paler. This whole even the phenomenon that's in the white culture, the European culture as well. They've just now started embracing a darker toned European
within like the last
in the
3
tanning
years.
situation. It's been way more than 3 years.
Yeah.
But colorism is not pervasive just within our community. I think it damages us more because we stay divided psychologically and socially as a result of it, whereas they can still say, well, hey, at the end of the day, no matter how white you look, we still
white.
You
are
know
white.
what? I disagree
comparatively.
with that Jamin's statement because it's a problem in all cultures.
Yeah.
In the Middle
Darker
Eastern
people
culture,
suffer
culture, they are ostracized the darker
Yep,
that
yep.
they are. It is
Absolutely.
the thing.
Yep.
2 years ago, Miss Japan was a biracial
Yep.
black
Oh, they
woman.
hated that.
It was a big issue for her. You want to sit there and say, well, she's Japanese. She speaks Japanese. She was raised Japanese. She had never been anyplace else but Japan. She just happened, her daddy happened to be black. She was ostracized. So it's in every culture. I think the bottom line is that it just depends on how you deal with it and the people around you. I've been blessed enough that my color hasn't been an issue. And
What do you mean by it hasn't been an issue?
I mean, like, I don't remember growing up. I mean, like, maybe I had times in middle school. That might be why I used to fight all the time, because it was a little bit of issue in middle school. But it wasn't the people around me. You know, I was raised by strong black women. It didn't matter to them what color they were.
Well, don't you think that's you talking as a recipient of the privilege part of that?
No. I'm saying, and you might be right, but I'm still saying I'm blessed that I was not raised in a society of black people denying their blackness. And I'm proud of that privilege because I see that and I know people that were. You know, I was raised by a mother and a grandmother who, no matter what, they could have passed. But my grandmother said when her cousins were passing, my grandmother was like, I'm black. I'm black. My great aunt she hated white people more than anybody. And you could not, you look at a picture and you would think she was white. She said because the advantage was she saw the other side. She heard what they said.
Yeah.
If when they thought she was white, she heard how they talked. And it made her hate them. It taught me to be more pro-black. I had to work harder to prove that I was black. When I went to the University of Alabama, and yes, I went to the University of Alabama in the 80s, I crossed racial lines. I was so proud of being the first black of many things. And in the end, that made me even stronger.
So you bring up a point that I want to discuss when you said that you had to work harder to be accepted within the black community.
Especially in the 80s.
Darker skinned black people will say that we have a certain, that we being, the darker skinned community says we have this plight of not being accepted by, or always being the focus of black negativity. The stereotypes are always focused there. When the dark skinned person walks down the street, that's where the purse is clutched. If the lighter skinned person, a fair skinned person walks by, it's a little bit more ease that's given there. On the other side of that spectrum, you're saying, well, hey, there is a certain level of dogmatism that occurred within the light-skinned part of that, and saying it wasn't just roses on my side either. They're going to look at that and say, well, that's not the same. It's not the same because it's a different type. You didn't deal with the stressors and the issues that we had to deal with. What is your response on that?
I would agree that it's different, but it's still stressors nonetheless. Mm-hmm. Okay? It's just a situation that no matter what, we all should come together, that we all had struggles. Mm-hmm. They might be a little bit different. Okay, somebody else might have struggled that I might not have noticed that doors open for me. And I'll be honest, I might be naive to that fact that maybe doors open for me mm-hmm. because of the color of my skin versus someone else. But it still was a stressor. It still is something that changed me. And I never denied, and I was never raised to deny my blackness. Mm-hmm. You know, I was teasing someone earlier that I go places, I think Damon was saying, I go places and people always still want to ask, what am I? What do you mix with? What do you, whatever? And I look at people honestly and they go, what are you? I go, black? I'm real confused by that concept because every single person in America is mixed with something.
Right. Well, and you know, when you talk...
People asking, what are you?
No, they want to ask him which generation are you? Are you the first generation, brother? But you know, and when you talk about that, that actually brings up another point, which is this concept of the one drop rule. And we talk about, and there's this term called miscegenation, which is essentially interracial relation, the product of an interracial relationship where you have different races mixing together, the progeny of that's the activity of miscegenation. And this one drop rule comes, this goes all the way back to 1662 in Virginia, where they came up with, the Virginia was the first state to say that hereditarily, if your mother had you as a slave, then guess what? You were also a slave. Mm-hmm. And no matter, as long as we can trace back where that first black person came from within the family, if we can trace a drop of black blood in you, then that is blackness is attributed to you, and it was passed into law. So that's where that one drop rule comes into, where no matter how far back, I mean, it went back. I think there was a case recently. When I say recently, this is 1985 in, I think it was Alabama, where the person's great grandfather, they found out that they were black, and because of that, they weren't allowed to do certain things because of that one drop rule. With the one drop, we see, and I've seen light-skinned people fight very hard to prove their blackness. They prove it all the time. My little brother and my little sister about as they look like flashlights. Okay, and here I am, my mom and myself about the same color with that honey brown pecan tan look about us.
Black is beautiful.
You know, and when we would walk around, we looked like a mixed family, but everybody was black, regular. I mean, just we always consider ourselves regular black. My brother has real. He's got first generation hair. You know, as light skinned as he is. You know. So you would wonder. As far as the one drop rule is concerned, I think that it's actually strengthened us in terms of what we feel is blackness, because we always embrace, well, hey, you're one of us. But on the same token, we pick and choose when we want to adhere to it. What I mean by that, let's take Jesse Williams, for example, the actor Jesse Williams, when he talked about black magic. All the women were talking about, yes, black, I'm going to get me that black chocolate man right there.
He divorced his black wife.
Until he had an issue with his marriage and he ended up with a white woman. Well, he ain't really black, though. All of a sudden, it became he's a mixed kid. So I think it's hurt us on one end, and we've picked and chosen when we want to accept blackness in its totality. Anybody want to speak on that?
No. What was your question?
Do we pick and choose?
I see you, brother. I see you.
I agree
I was
with
reading
you,
the comments.
Brandon. I think I'm offended by that concept, but I remember, because I'm a fan of Jesse Williams, and don't get me wrong, I was more a fan when he was married to the black woman, because I was like, look, this strong, and I knew he was biracial to begin with, but we always applaud, even like Colin. We're talking about Colin. Colin is biracial, but no matter what Colin said, the same thing Jesse said, that it doesn't matter that I'm biracial, because when America sees me, looks at me, they see a black man.
Yeah.
Okay.
But what about those who are biracial, but they're not even passing? They just look white. Like,
Well, that would be passing, though.
I mean, no. There's
because
some
let me
people
say
who are
this much.
biracial
I
who
have
look.
relatives that look white, but you can't tell them they're white because you don't say it, because they are black.
You're talking about the act
That's
of
totally
passing?
different.
I'm talking about, you would not know that they were biracial if somebody wasn't like, hey, their mama is black. Like, I think it's Pete Wentz. He's a musician. He looks like a white man. Like, he does not look biracial. He does not have none of the phenotype, no lips, no hair, no nothing. He looks like a white man until somebody said that, oh, his mother, I think his mother's like Jamaican or something like that.
You said, what about him, though?
I'm saying, so what about those people who...
Well, he's passing though.
I mean, he's only passing now because you know that he has a black parent.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is he never even mentioned it. So in my eyes, he was passing all along. He didn't even let us know that he had black in him. So we say he's passing now because we know he has
Let's
black.
talk about
but
Meghan
it's-
Markle. Let's talk about Meghan Markle. It's the same issue. Nobody really knew one way or the other, and she wasn't passing. She just says, "Look, I just lived my day to day. I knew I was black. I spent every day with my black mama. My mama raised me. She happened to be raised in a white environment, but she had a black mother, and she said nobody asked me, so it wasn't like I denied it. So
I think it's a little different when you're
why
black.
do
What do you mean?
Why do light skin? And I'm just saying this. We expect that a biracial light skinned person that looks more white is supposed to come out and go, "Hey, I'm black."
No,
but we don't do
Yeah,
that
but
for
you-
the
No,
black
wait, you,
people.
Yeah,
hold on, wait a
passing-
minute. But
but
Meghan
passing-
Markle
y'all-
looks black.
but y'all-
So-
She has some type of black
But for
phenotype
the
to her.
longest,
You
people
could,
did-
Yeah,
but-
you could tell Meghan. I can't say
But
that
the
those two.
people
Hold
didn't
on,
think
wait a
she
minute. Let me
was for a
talk.
long
Let me
time.
talk. I always thought Meghan Markle was black. When
Me
I
too.
first saw her on Suits, I was like, "That's a black girl." I never for once thought that girl was anything other than black.
I just thought she was fine.
Pete though, I always thought
She's on
that man
Suits.
was white. I
Yeah,
never
Princess
thought that
is
man had any black in him until it came out that he was black. So my issue is the people. I don't even think he would have said anything unless it came out. That's my thing.
Should he have to, though?
I mean, he
should.
should. I'm not saying that he had to, but I'm saying, would we call him a black man?
Because my thing
would
is,
you say
why-
that he's
my
a black
thing is-
man?
My thing is, he's lived for all intents and purposes, if we're looking at it, he's lived his life as a white man. So I'm questioning him as a black person.
How?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
What has he done to say
He
I'm
damn
a
sure
white
acted
man?
black.
What does that mean, though?
I mean, but that's
Oh,
that's
here we
another-
go. Here we go.
But that's another thing
What
about
has he
gatekeeping
done?
What is
black.
acting
That's what I'm
black?
saying. So black
So
people
he
gotta
can't
come out
be
and
black
say,
because he
okay.
don't act the way
No,
you
no,
act.
Hold on. We got to go one. Let's feel this fervor
What
one
I'm
at a
saying
time.
is, I think y'all are mishearing me. What I'm saying is, you can't compare Meghan Markle to him. You know she's black. He didn't
When
even.
has she acted black?
I didn't know she was black.
You
y'all.
can look
I'm
at the
sorry.
girl.
But you're saying,
No,
hold on. What she's
But
saying
you
is
said he
physically.
didn't act black.
But
So how does
he's
she act black
also.
just because she
But
looks
I'm
a
not
certain
I
way?
was
saying I'm not saying
surprised.
she
He
acts
walks
black
through his
life
life as a white man.
But
Nobody-
she walks
Yeah,
through
so
life
you
No,
as
she
a
doesn't.
man.
No,
When you
hold on.
look at him, if you, I'm not sure if you know who he is, but if you were to Google
I
him,
know who he is.
okay, so if you
I
Google
don't know
him,
who he is.
But how can he walk through his life as anything
I'm
other than
saying
what he is?
just
They're
like
saying
when
physically,
the society,
the visual
yes, the
aspect.
visual that he has, society
But
sees him as a white
as a
man.
white
Okay.
man, and he didn't acknowledge anything else until it came out. So my thing is,
With
why
with
didn't
that
you
one
say
drop
anything?
rule,
If that
What was
one,
he-
wait,
what
let me
was he
finish. Let
supposed
me
to say?
finish. If you didn't, my thing is this: if you can pass as white, and you have black in you, and you're so proud of your culture, as they always come out and say when it comes out that they have black, why didn't you mention that you were a part of that culture? Why do we have to just come out and ask you if you were a part of our culture? Why don't you say it yourself?
But not even that. Why? I
And
mean,
give up this first class life?
exactly.
Hey, y'all discriminate against me.
That's not what was. But I'm saying the topic is the one drop rule and who is considered black. What I'm saying is, there are people out here that are biracial. Some of us look more black when they're biracial, and some of us walk and appear to society as white folks. They look white. So are they coming to the barbecue or no? Like who? And the issue is gatekeeping blackness. Who am I?
Thank you.
Who am I or anyone else to say it? But at the same time, if you are showing me that you are walking your life, you're living your life.
But let me just say,
I still don't understand what this man is doing to walk around and say, "Hey guys, I'm a white
Wait,
man."
but-
if he's just doing his
He
own
look
life,
David, let me
white.
just-
He gonna get hired before you.
that doesn't mean he's living his life as a white man.
And that's what I'm saying. We
that's
don't know
what the
these
world
things.
sees him as.
We don't know these. We don't.
and
And
he
I say this about.
I think it's also
I
an
say this
age difference thing
Hold on,
here.
No, I say this about entertainers in general. We love to ascribe certain things to people because of what we think. We don't know that man. We don't know how he walked through his life. We don't know what the people around him knew about him. We don't know. All you say is he didn't get on some interview and say, "Well, you know, my mama's black or my daddy's black, so that means he's passing." We don't know
That
a
man might
damn
be in the
thing.
Red Rooster.
We
I mean,
don't know
I
what-
don't-
we don't
I
know
don't think
what he
anyone-
did.
no one's
because he
campaigning for
doesn't
him
look
to
a
come
certain
out.
way
Yeah,
or
no,
act a certain way or
No,
dress a
I'm
certain
not-
way.
I'm not saying
some
that.
social
No,
construct
you're
that people
acting like we're
created.
saying he's just.
Now we say he's passing.
We didn't
wait,
create it. White
Look,
folks
let me-
created it. She
let
just
me-
said
let me
that
just
Jesse
throw-
Williams said that he sees society sees him as a black man. Society sees Pete Wentz as a white man.
So what's interesting in this discussion is that we're talking about the visual appearance of somebody and attributing that to a lifestyle. Now, there are visibly black people. Hold on, there are visibly. Hold on, Charles. I know you. Your light is shining through, sir. Calm down. So there are visibly black people that are not conscious in the sense that they're not woke, they're not talking about black issues, they just live life. They don't want to talk about race. They're like, look, I'm just about to do me, F what you heard, I'm doing things all about me. That kind of person, we don't
Hold 'em to the
expect
fire.
anything from them because they are living visibly as a black person. Ergo, we assume that they're part of the experience. On the other side of that, you got this guy who passes for white, who's doing the same exact thing as this black guy who doesn't speak on racial issues is doing. He doesn't have to profess that he's black. He's simply existing in life. Are we now saying that because he does not have the same visibility as I do, that he needs to announce it,
himself.
or at the very least be pro-black in all of his activities?
He doesn't necessarily have to be pro-black. It's black folks out here that ain't pro-black.
Exactly.
Well, that's the whole point.
I think
But
let me
I'm-
say it's their life. I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about what y'all were talking about, people that are either white or black. It's how they're raised. Let's just be honest about that. Yeah. Meghan Markle was raised by a black mother who defined herself as black, who despite all her yoga and all her stuff, she was black. She lived every day as a black existence. Pete Wentz, and I'm just doing my little research here because at first his mother and father were married. His mother was a very, very light-skinned Jamaican that in the end lived a kind of non-black life. So he was raised in a non-black life, and I think that's really different about how you're raised. It's not his fault.
Of course not. I never said it was his fault.
But I'm saying, so we still get the, and then every once in a while you have those Collins that were raised one way, but their experience was different because how they lived. And that's Collins' experience. He's like, look, my experience was different. We can't sit there and we can't even give Tiger that. Tiger knew he looked different, but because he was raised in and he was a prodigy at such a young age, he didn't have the same experience.
Yeah, he didn't have the same normal
So
experience.
I think it's really about your experience.
Yeah.
So, in this conversation, we're talking about this black experience and what it means to be black. We've already seen even in this discussion that there's levels to this blackness type thing. We move that conversation over into cultural appropriation, and what we mean by cultural appropriation is in every long-standing culture there are societal norms that occur there, and then there's a tradition that is established, whether it be in music, whether it be in clothing, physical features, all these things that happen that become part of the culture itself. And Rod talks about, and he's not here with us today, but he said if there's no appropriate racial gatekeeping, then why is Rachel Dolezal getting so much heat? Now, I'm taking his comment and applying it to this cultural appropriation because Rachel Dolezal is the kind of person that took the hairstyles, she took the braids that have traditionally been a black thing, and then took that and put it on hers. We talk about Eminem just came out with a new album. This is a white guy rapping. What do we consider? How far does cultural appropriation go? Because at a certain point, you can't help but appropriate cultural activity. And is there a difference between cultural assimilation and cultural appropriation?
I really don't even know what to say about Rachel.
I like Rachel.
Here's the thing with Rachel. Rachel, at the end of the day,
that.
can decide that she no longer likes being black and go back to being white. I think that's my biggest issue with Rachel. She's choosing, what does she call it? Transracial.
She's really wearing a mask.
If she's
Like,
choosing
there's
to
no
be
way
black
around it.
because that's her reality and that's what she wants to live in. But if she suddenly decides that she wants to change her reality, she can go back to being the white woman that is in her DNA.
That she was raised to be.
That she was raised to be. And so for me with Rachel, it ain't just cultural appropriation. It's just a whole another psychological issue within her brain. And I don't even know what to think about her.
She lied about having black parents.
But she
Go ahead,
had black
Damon.
children.
So
That is
Damon,
much
the
is
thing
true.
about Rachel I like is,
That don't
like
make
you
her-
said,
that don't make her black.
Rachel made the choice. Right, and she could have chose to live her entire white existence and all the privilege afforded her, and she chose to be black. And she didn't just say I'm black. She changed her hair,
You
changed
can
her
choose to
body,
be black.
became president of the NAACP, whatever that chapter. I got no problem with that. I mean, I think being black is awesome. So if you want to choose to be black like me, go rock on with your bad stuff.
But
I'm
she
with
can also
you.
change
But
to
you
go
can't
back.
choose to be
Hold
white
on.
though.
But that, so what?
But
I
she
would
has
make
it.
that choice, and so you can't get mad at her because she chose black and can choose to unchoose it. I mean, the fact is, she's chosen to be black, and she's honored the black people.
So will you be saying
Hold
the
on,
same
she-
thing if
hold on,
she
hold on, hold on, let me
If a
finish.
man decides he wants to be a woman, he can go back to being a
Hold on,
man.
she
I mean,
adopted
seriously.
being black, and then didn't adopt the negative aspects that people associate with being black.
She
came
did.
out there and she picked a black hairstyle that I thought was cool, dreads or whatever it was. She used was black and then promulgated black greatness and not like being what we call black ghetto and bullshit like that. So
Okay,
what's
so
the
here's my
difference?
question
what's
to
wrong
you
with
then.
black
But
ghetto?
here's my question to you then. So if
Exactly.
she decides to come and say, I'm tired of this, I want to go back to being white, well then what will your thoughts be of her then?
Well, I mean, then I would be like, oh, that sucks, Rachel. But I'm not going to hate her for something that happened. I'm not going to.
That you don't want to be black
what I
no
say
more,
about-
Rachel.
You
This is
can't
what I
We
say
needed
about
you
Rachel,
so
though.
bad.
hate
If
somebody
So there are enough black
you
people that
can't
don't
hate
wanna be
somebody
black.
for a
So
choice they
I
haven't
don't
made
mind
yet.
a white woman wanting to be black.
And also,
this goes
I
back to
can't
the
hate-
question.
Hold on, I can't hate somebody for something they haven't done. I can't look at you and say you haven't done this, but because you might do it, I'm going to not like you.
But
for it.
as
So
Crystal
hold
just
on,
pointed
hold
out,
on.
she took stuff from black people as a
She
white
was-
woman.
did she
hold on, ladies.
She was
Scholarships.
getting speaking engagements
A lot of
as a
things.
black woman. People were coming to her for her expertise.
Black woman,
for being
hold
a
on.
black
Hold on, black woman. The question is, when you talk about that, what is the difference between cultural assimilation versus cultural appropriation? Because at some point, I'm sorry?
A Kardashian is cultural appropriation.
What is the difference between that and assimilation? Because at some point you're taking from a culture and
The
adopting
issue is
it.
this: when people like the Kardashians with the cornrows and stuff, saying that it looks like they created it's something that came from them, versus in Rachel's situation where she was just grabbing the stuff and using it. She never defined it as I'm creating this or I started this.
She never took it.
She just saw it, liked it, started to wear it, and
Took opportunities with it.
But I feel like cultural assimilation is probably like when black women, when perms were a thing and natural hair would died out and everyone was getting perms and things like that because it appeared more palatable to society and to white folks. I feel like that's an assimilation.
But didn't the perm, isn't that like us
Denying our own blackness.
Yeah, exactly. Isn't that just like copying white folks?
I mean, it's not necessarily copying white folks because a perm to them makes their hair curly. So I mean, it's a relaxer.
Why is that?
Why would you do that? Yeah.
I mean,
why are we not stealing from their?
It's
own?
appropriation.
Yeah.
But here's
but
the
not
thing,
even because
so
straight
why
hair.
are
But straight
we
hair is
mad?
not
Why are we
exclusive
mad
to
at
white
Yes,
white
people.
straight
woman?
hair is not it's like she said. It's in certain parts of Africa, black women have straight hair.
But why did black women in America do it?
But
Because
that's what I'm
they
saying.
saw white women with straight hair,
Why are we
right?
mad at a white woman appropriating and doing that, but we're not mad at black people that
Exactly.
do it?
Yeah.
I mean, black people have been doing it since the beginning of
So
time.
what is
Bleaching
this?
their
We just
skin.
got finished
This is a
talking
hair
about
issue?
colorism.
Yeah.
No, we just got finished talking about colorism, and as the light-skinned person on the panel, that we had to always justify that we were black, and that black people have been trying to be white for forever.
But I feel like
And
that's
we don't
systemic
get
as
so
well.
mad at that.
That's for
We give
survival
them a
purposes.
pass.
That's for survival.
Perms
That's not
y'all
because
get
we
better
hate
jobs.
being
That's
black.
a totally different thing.
Why it wasn't? There have been cases that have been argued in the Supreme Court about black women in their hair and how these kids can't go to school because of to wear their natural hair. Natural hair was deemed nappy and
To this day.
like.
But is that why people were permanent hair, or were they doing
Yes!
it because they
You know
were
what? I
appropriate?
disagree with
No,
y'all.
it's
Well,
not.
I'm gonna say this much. Y'all disagree that black people did it as a means of survival. That is not true.
I don't think so
Because
either.
black people did it as a means of trying to come up.
look white.
I'm just telling you.
So if it's a mean
I mean,
to
it's
come
the
up,
proximity-
so if it's a
it's
mean
the
to come
proximity
up
to
and you're
whiteness.
trying to
It's
be
not
you're trying to
survival.
be better and get up, and you're already considered lower, then I do see that as a means of
That's
survival
not
because you're
survival.
trying to
'Cause then
come
you're
up
trying
and
to
be
sit
seen
there
as
and say,
better.
there's a difference. Me survive whether I eat or I work or whatever. That's not necessarily true. I'm just saying, because as the person that has seen it and generationally and seen it, and my grandmother and her sisters chose not to pass. Their first cousins chose to pass. And the difference is that they were like, it's white versus black, choosing to be white versus black. It wasn't a means of survival. 'Cause
So
in
if
the
you
end,
go to a job and they tell you that you need to change your hair in order to get this job, or you need to do something different to your hair, or you can't get this job, so what?
Or your child has to cut their hair and they can't wear braids or dreads to come to this school that you've already paid tuition for or gotten them accepted to, then it's not for survival.
They
It's
get
not.
a
I'm
fade.
no, but here's
But why
the thing,
should
why
they
should I
have to?
Because they don't deem it acceptable. So now I have to change myself to get this job, to pay my bills, to do all of these things. And you can't tell me that's not a means of survival because they're already basing me on how I look and not what my resume and my credentials say.
Well, that's certainly one form of assimilation. So I think there's a negative assimilation and then there's a positive assimilation. On the one side, the negative assimilation, which you're talking about, is saying that you have to conform. It's conformity.
Yeah,
you have
exactly.
to conform to our social norms in order to fit into it, regardless of whatever social norms that you were preceded us. So in your household, you were allowed to wear kinky hair. Now that you've matriculated into our culture, this business culture, you now have to conform to our standard of whatever the norm is. So that's the negative assimilation. The positive assimilation is using something and utilizing something for the benefit of the greater good of that society. For instance, take yoga. Yoga it comes from the Asian culture. We all have assimilated and appropriated yoga into our lifestyle. The wheelbarrow. I mean, all these things. Hold on, all these things we've taken from other cultures and assimilated to benefit our culture in a positive way. Now, when you talk about appropriation, I think that when you're speaking about appropriation, you have to look at appropriation. To me, is a question of, has credit been given at the end of the day? If you have not given credit, then it is appropriation.
Yes.
If you have given credit, then it's simply a matter of assimilation, and a positive assimilation. Because when we talk about our entertainers, the white entertainers that we've allowed to come into R&B, as long as they said, hey, you know what I'm saying, I got my start, I loved Tupac, or I loved Aretha, whoever the case may be, I got my soul from them. They say, you know what, you have given honor and homage to the person that was there, versus the other person that says, oh, you see these new this glass hair that we're talking about, the Kim Kardashians. Well, that's not something new. That's a silky press that's been around since Cicely Tyson was up there singing Negro spirituals. So there's a difference, because you have now given credit versus not giving credit.
Like when Kim Kardashian called Bo Derek braids, those cornrows she called them Bo Derek braids, and like everybody was like, no, this white woman did not create this hairstyle. This has been given to us from Africa. You take our stuff, you put it on you, and then you credit it to somebody that didn't get it. Like,
yeah, it's more than credit though. It goes beyond that. It's who reaps the final benefit. Because if you look at somebody like Bruno Mars, right? Bruno Mars always talks about his influences from the past, but more than talking about them, he works with them and makes sure that they get the money. Because I don't give a damn about you giving me credit for something I did. Let me get some of the value that you're getting out of it. Like, so when these people do things, like, I think that's one step is, yes, give the originator credit, give people their credit. I think the next step is people like Eminem, people like Bruno Mars, who know that they are doing black music. They work with the people that helped build that culture, and they make sure that they get the dollars that come from that.
I don't think that's necessary. I think it'd be great. That's altruistic, but that's not necessary for it to happen, because at the end of the day, you work with who you want to work with. And if we want to protect our own product, then we need to be making sure that we're doing things fiscally in a business savvy sense to protect it. We need to be trademarking our own things. We need to be saying that there's no way for you to make dollars in this industry without using us. We can't do that. We took a musical thing, and we can no longer actually pay for it.
Didn't know the value of it until it was too late.
It doesn't
Muddy
matter.
Waters didn't know the value of his music.
It doesn't matter.
We are
now.
They weren't able to contractually get the things that these people can
we
do
are
now
in a position
where
we are savvy enough, and we are educated enough to create those things.
Wasn't savvy enough.
But we're not talking about that. At this point, when you're talking about people being able to benefit financially from something, that's on us. If somebody comes in and takes some shit of ours and then they go benefit, you talk about these Asians with these nail salons, they have come in to our communities, taking that shit all the way over, and we're still talking about, I can't believe, I don't know what they're talking about in that Asian salon. You know what I'm saying? We have the ability to create our own nail salons, but we don't do it. They've created that. I mean, some people, but on a large scale, we're not protecting our own vested interest in our cultural identity.
So I agree with that. You can't be mad at somebody else for capitalizing on something. You can't expect them to give you any financial benefit from it just because you might have learned something from somebody in that culture's history. When you speak from Bruno Mars, yeah, it's good that he gives homage to the people that he learned from, people that he's inspired from, but what does he owe them?
I didn't say he owed them anything. I'm just saying, if I come into the music, and I'm talking specifically about things like entertainment and style, clothing, those type of things. If I come into a game and I say, man, everything I love about R&B music, I love from Teddy Riley. Well, then I'm not going to go get the producer that sounds like Teddy Riley when Teddy is right there. Like, that's the thing I'm saying is, like, that's when it's really a good look to me, past the appropriation thing, is like, you got these people that can give you exactly what they created. And go get them. Go get them.
Hold on. Damon wants to.
Teddy, if I'm up a startup, I can't afford it.
I gotta go to Freddie down here and say, Freddie, I need a beat.
I need to sound like Teddy first.
Damon, what do you have to say on that?
All I want to say, a few moments ago, we were talking about survival, and it got narrowed down to black hair, natural hair, being specific. I remember when my wife went from permed or relaxed hair, what it was called now, to natural. the flack she got wasn't from her white or non-black coworkers. It was from the black coworkers. It was the black people telling her, hey, you got to straighten your hair back out. Hey, you can't do it. And it was the non-black people going to her and saying, your hair looks good. It was, I like your hair. I like this. Luckily, none of them said they want to touch it. But they did. She got more praise from non-black people than from black people in the workplace. Now, reason why I bring this up is we're talking about surviving in the workplace, and we've talked about colorism at the same time. All that to me ties together, and we can't always all put it on the non-blacks. I think in this situation with the hair and the narrow stories y'all were talking about, probably were not black people doing that. But ultimately though, we have to accept in part our responsibility in some of everything we've experienced, and we played our own part in our own negative down spiral and our own
I can
issues.
agree with that.
And we had to fix that as well, and not solely put it on the colonizers or the mayonnaisers, as somebody said recently.
Do you think that part of that issue that you just brought up with your wife had to do with black fear versus white novelty? And what I mean by that is black people have a fear of not being accepted. So look, we always have this, twice as hard to get just the same amount. So saying that, look, you got to come correct because your individualness actually represents us collectively. So if you do something that's out of step, then that makes us look bad. So there's a fear from the black people versus the white people saying, "Oh, I never seen that before. That's cute. Let me see." It's the
To
novelty.
answer your question, that may be the case, but we have to overcome that bullshit. I mean, that fear has to be overcome in some ways. We as parents, we teach our children to overcome your issues, overcome your fears, step out there. All I'm saying is, what that comment was, we spoke a lot about in that one narrow issue of the black hair, of the dreadlocks and the natural hair, and the only real world example I have in my life, and not in something that I read on the paper, was my wife, and I could tell you she experienced more from white people, more employment and career wise acceptance from non-blacks than from blacks, for whatever reason.
I think when it's a change like that, you have to give our people an opportunity to catch up. When I went natural, I'm only 33. I went natural in 2010. Yeah, so I'm hella young.
Sir, you're 3 years old. That's a solid 3 years.
It's a good 3 years. But when I went natural in 2010, none of these products existed, none of these YouTubers existed. It was just catching on, especially in my generation. Yep. And I didn't know what I was doing. Even my mama was like, "Girl, what you gonna do with your hair?"
Girl, my mama too.
And so,
girl, me 3.
Right, even black men, nappy-headed black boys was, they wasn't even, walking around. I love nappy-headed black boys, by the way.
Why they gotta be nappy-headed?
Ain't nothing wrong with nappy hair.
Naturally kinky.
Ain't nothing wrong with nappy hair.
wrong with
I love nappy hair. But I say that to say I agree. But when I went natural, my friends wanted to go natural. My mama went and got sister locks. You know what I'm saying? When I had my daughter, I made sure, and she was one of the reasons that I went natural, because I'm like, I can't be out here, you know what I'm saying, steady getting these relaxers, and my baby.
I can't afford to choose.
Right.
When my daughter shoot, I was so glad when she went natural. I was like,
right. So I think, and now when the wave caught on. You know what I'm saying? So I think sometimes in that regard, when we, the narrow-mindedness of the hair that we're speaking about, you have to let people get caught up.
You have to.
So this is the last question on the appropriation before we wrap this up into Black Magic. As it pertains to the black culture, if we juxtapose that with the African culture, can black people culturally appropriate from the African culture? And I say that meaning when we're talking about we're wearing the dashikis, we're getting the kente cloths, we're doing certain things, we're getting the braids in the head, we're doing certain things that no longer identify, we are not African. Okay, we are descendants of Africans, but we have a unique and identifiable culture as Black Americans. And quite honestly, there are some Africans, and maybe more than some, that take offense to some of the things that we do. One, because we do it in ignorance. Two, because they no longer feel the same kind of camaraderie that we do towards them, that we expect from them back.
Right.
I think it's so many layers to that.
It's so many
layers. I think it comes down to, cultural, how they were raised, how their generations because some Africans that I meet are like first generation Americans. The stories that they've heard about Black Americans,
They think they're better than us.
Some of them do think that.
Yeah.
It's so many layers.
Not all of them.
But I
put
think
that out there.
when Black Americans are wearing the dashikis, I don't think that we're not trying to come from a place of ignorance. I think it's like we just want to reconnect. Like at home, they treat us like others. Africans treat us like others. But you'll talk to your brother that look like you before, you know what I'm saying, you'll let somebody that don't look like you try to define who you are. But I don't think it's right for them to say that we're trying to appropriate their culture. I think that they should be more willing to if you think it's ignorance, then teach us. Then let us know.
I think it's interesting that they say we try to appropriate their culture when they come over here
and they will appropriate ours.
If that's the case, then we're appropriating each other, because you come over here and you do what we do and you dress like us and you even begin to talk like us. But the minute that we begin to do and wear what you do, we're suddenly appropriating your it's like there's a difference there. So why is it okay for you to come to us and do what we do, but it's not okay for us to say, hey, what you're doing is beautiful, what you're wearing is beautiful, I want to do this as well.
So Quentin, you as the crossover, you look like you had something that you wanted to say.
You a crossover?
I don't know what he's talking about. But I mean, since I come to Houston, I've come in contact with more Africans. But I think what they have to understand is whether they're African and we're African American, whatever, we still come from that culture. So whether they like it or not, man, they're gonna have to. I mean, you're gonna just shut up and deal with it, because if I want to wear a dashiki, I'm gonna do it. I was born and raised in the United States of America, but we all know how we got here. So it's our culture too, right? We just know it. We just know fragments and pieces of it. And like she mentioned earlier, if you got a problem with it, you should be willing to reach out and teach us the culture more so than be offended by us embracing the culture.
I'm gonna go somewhere. I'm gonna go wild now on this. So, and I'm sitting here thinking about, we just got finished dragging Rachel Dolezal in the mud because she decided to be Black. She appropriated Blackness, but yet we're sitting there saying, but it's okay for us to appropriate African culture that we weren't raised in. That we don't know nothing.
I mean,
about.
African culture to me doesn't exist. Africa's
a continent. We're just saying it because we're still Black and we got some of that drop of our blood in there, supposedly, and that it's okay for us to do that. But, this is a woman that she said, I was raised, because she married a Black man, and she had 2 Black sons, and she identified and saw what they went through. So why do we hold her to a different standard than we hold ourselves?
Well, I didn't have a problem with Rachel.
No, I'm just saying.
Me and Damon both
I'm throwing this out there.
I get what you're saying.
I'm just saying to throw this out there. Because
in
the end, it's really about where your heart lies. If in the end, I feel like Damon and we were laughing and it's a joking in there. I've had my DNA done. And I laugh at the fact that my family and my joke and a boyfriend said, dang.
You are the colonizer.
I'm barely on that. I didn't even realize it was like, they were like, ooh, shoot, I guess I could be biracial. I didn't know I could. But if I look at it, in the end, I could sit there and say, I could choose to be, because if you do the breakdown of it, I could choose to say, well, I'm white. Somebody else could choose. But it's about how you identify in your heart.
Yeah. At the end of the day, that is right.
So Andrea Soto's made a really good point, because she says, so do you afford Africans the same opportunity to appropriate American Black culture? Lovey got dragged the other day, and I think what she's referring to is she's the social commentator. She spoke on Tevin Campbell during Aretha. The people were talking about who's going to be singing for Aretha. She made the comment like, why are we talking about Tevin? I mean, she kind of said Tevin's irrelevant, and Black people went to Black Twittered. They Black Twittered her to death on this.
She got a history.
And she got drugged for that, saying that hold on, African woman, you don't know Black culture to be talking on it like that. Is there something to be said about? I mean, we want Africans with us until it deals
Until they
with
offend.
Well,
right until they offend, because there
but
is
they're
that,
always
but,
offending
but
us.
that but that goes back to the
offending
we have an identifiable, unique culture as Black Americans that is separate and apart from the African
But here's
culture.
my thing, because people like
Or the African diaspora.
Lovey, you know, she makes it her point to separate herself at times when she wants to be elitist. So that's that, and a lot of them do that. So yes, we have our culture, but when you come in aggressive, you know, and you know, setting yourself aside, and then when we're trying to come in and be a part of it, and you're like, nah, and it's just one of those things where it's like we can't win for losing. We're trying to learn and be there, and then you turn around and you say we can't do it. So what? So what now? Where do we go?
Fair enough. All right, Damon, you get the last word on this as we wrap up.
You know, every time I hear somebody talk about blacks appropriating African culture, it's usually one of three things. First, saying I'm African. Second, a dashiki. And third, now a kente cloth or some kind of a hairdo. It seems to me like that is across the entire continent of Africa, those three things. I don't know if dashikis are just for Kenyans, and if kente cloths are just for Nigerians, and the braids are just for Madagascarans or whatever. It seems like the entire country of Africa will adopt these things. I'm sorry, I said entire continent. Wrong C word. The entire continent of Africa adopts those things. When we wear them to symbolize our roots, and it's not like we're trying to say we didn't come from Europe, or we didn't come from Spain, we didn't come from Mexico or Asia, we came from Africa, and so we're drawing back to something very general. What I don't see is Black African Americans adopt a very, very specific cultural thing, like the racial scarring in some cultures, or the tribal hunts in some cultures. We don't adopt a very serious cultural thing to a very specific demographic of Africans that they offend. It's more like something very general across the continent of Africa. I don't think that's the same comparison.
I'm not about to cut my face.
I'm just not. I'm just not.
I mean, whenever we
dealing
were
with-
dashiki,
We're not dealing with genital mutilation.
Yeah, I'm not about to burn myself.
And I'm not saying we should.
I'm not looking for no lions, and I'm not cutting my face.
The point I was making was if we are appropriating the culture, is of a generic culture that's across the entire country, the continent of Africa, and not of a very specific, minute demographic within a culture of Africa.
Yeah. But we've just kind of been embracing like Africa for the sake of
we
visual
romanticize it.
visual acuity. Like we're saying
makes us
Africa,
feel a part of
right?
something.
All of a sudden, Africa's like
I love
the dream thing to do. You know, when Marcus Garvey was talking about let's go back, there were only a handful of people saying, "Whoa, what you mean go back? Now I can go visit, but I don't want to go back." And now all of a sudden we've embraced this, almost as if. We want to look at Africa right now, and it's kind of like what Danny said. We've romanticized Africa,
I'm good
but
on
we
it.
don't. It's almost like what Paul Bodie said. Everybody want to be a nigga until it's time to be a nigga.
I've been to
Everybody wants
Rachel.
to deal with Africans until it's time to go to Africa.
We haven't romanticized Africa. We romanticize Wakanda. That's the difference.
That's it.
Everybody want to go to
Wakanda.
Wakanda.
Wakanda
wanna go
just
back
came
before
out.
Wakanda, sir.
Wakanda just came out.
We've
been talking about this for
Africa.
a
I can
while.
tell you, I'm good on it.
Africa is someplace in Africa
Everybody
are
wants to
beautiful.
visit.
Yeah, where I went was beautiful, but for me, it, you know,
Real talk. If they got air conditioning and deodorant, I might be willing.
See?
You know,
I'm
I'm just saying. I'm just like. I too have been to Africa.
Yes, you have.
All right.
I saw your picture.
You know, I stay in Africa. Anyway, no, I don't though. All right, so it's time to go ahead and move on to our black magic of the day. We always try to highlight the people that we don't see necessarily all day, every day, and people that are doing above and beyond things in our community, both locally and nationally and internationally. In this case, we've got 3 black people that are now in the running for governor. For Florida, we have Mr. Andrew Gillum. He is a FAMU alumnus. He was also the mayor of Tallahassee. Stacey Abrams is over there in Georgia running as the Democratic candidate. And Ben Jealous, got the coolest name I've ever heard. I've been jealous. Y'all been jealous of me. Is running in the great state of Maryland. Now, in the history, it's funny because we always talk about President Obama as the first black president, which actually historically is not accurate. But we won't even get into that right now. But we laud him as our guy. There have only been 2 black people that have ever held the position of governor within the United States. So these people are doing above and beyond our wildest dreams by even being there as the primary candidate for a national political party. So well done to you, lady and gentlemen, for being Black Magic. Juanita, it has been a pleasure having you on the show. I mean, I want to say this, all three of our women today, I want to say almost outdid the fellas in terms of
Black Girl Magic. Black
ferocity
Girl Magic.
and veracity.
Absolutely.
So I want to say,
Well, they
ladies,
did say there was classy ratchet. I wasn't expecting.
so ladies, Dantrice, Danny, it has been a pleasure having you on.
Thank you.
I know you ladies have some skills that we want to bring back and highlight one day. And ladies and gentlemen, so this was our professional for the group today, and we always want to bring in people who've we scour the internet looking for people who have shown commentary on certain issues. We want to bring them in, and these two ladies were two of those people that we thought had very interesting and eloquent viewpoints on Facebook. So if you have something that you want to say, feel free to hit us up. You can email us, you can come on our page, talk to us. We want you guys sharing the page. Facebook, we are Intelligence the Podcast. On you can go to our YouTube via our website, which is www.gentspodcast.com, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Instagram is Gents Podcasting. So we always have, excuse me, I don't want to, we always want to be able to highlight people. Ladies, I know you're a photographer, right, Danny?
Yes.
If they want to look at your stuff, or if they want to book you, where can they go?
They can visit me on Instagram, The Abstract People. On Instagram, or my website is www.thedanny.me.
All right, and since we like healthy competition,
I'm Danny Parrish.
Dantrice, you
That's
are
my
also
sister.
you're a photographer and a singer.
Yes.
So if people want to either listen to your tunes or book you and see what you got going on, where can they go?
To book
Sing the
me,
website.
On the spot.
you can find me at DeonTreeSlachelle.com. You can email me at DeonTreeSlachelle@gmail.com, and you can find my photography page at DeonTreeSlachelle Photography on Facebook.
And Juanita, if for whatever reason they have some legal questions that Damon and I can't answer, where can they reach you?
You can hit me up on Facebook, Juanita A. Jackson. On Instagram, Juanita J. If you need an amazing criminal defense attorney, not to take away from Brennan, but I know you're a public defender. You can reach my office, the Jackson Law Firm, at 713-370-7130.
And I want to say, I don't know if I'm allowed to speak on what you've done in the past, but we have almost, I'm not going to say almost, you are a local celebrity. Absolutely. Because you had a show that was on the air, a nationwide show called what?
Sisters-in-Law.
Sisters-in-Law. So, I mean, yeah. Not only was she a member, but she was also the president, and she produced that show, right?
I produced the show. I was just, I had a dream and met right people, and it was a blessing, and everything came into place. And we did one season on We, and it's still available on Apple TV. I think you can still find it on demand, our season, if you haven't watched it. And you can see Black female excellence.
Go ahead, girl.
Yeah.
I hear you.
Right.
I hear you. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's our time. Hope to see you back on Intelligence, bringing you knowledge with the power to change. We will see you next week.